U.S. legislatures have announced a $1.7 trillion spending bill that includes more aid for Ukraine and roughly 10% increase in defense expenditure. On December 20th, lawmakers introduced the bill, cramming as many issues as they could into the huge package. It contains approximately $45 billion in emergency aid for Ukraine. If approved, it would be the largest American infusion to Ukraine to date, exceeding President Joe Biden's $37 billion emergency request. So what does this mean for the Russia-Ukraine war, the U.S. economy, and the rest of the world? On Wednesday, President Biden and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky presented a united front against Russian aggression at the White House, with Mr. Biden proposing billions of dollars in additional military aid to reinforce Ukrainian forces and repel Russian attacks. At a press conference, President Biden stated that the United States would continue to support Ukraine as long as it takes, and he condemned Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure as the terrible winter cold sets in. We should be clear about what Russia is doing. It is purposefully attacking Ukraine's critical infrastructure, destroying the systems that provide heat and light to the Ukrainian people during the coldest, darkest part of the year. Russia is using winter as a weapon, Mr. Biden said, standing next to Zelensky in the White House East Room. It's important for the American people and for the world to hear it directly from you, Mr. President, about Ukraine's fight and the need to continue to stand together through 2023. When asked what message he had for Americans, Zelensky said, "We have the same values. We really fight for our common victory against this tyranny, and that is real life, and we will win. And I really want to win together. Not want, I am sure," said Zelensky, who altered between speaking in English and Ukrainian. In the 300 days since the Russian invasion began, Zelensky's travel to Washington was his first known travel outside of Ukraine. Mr. Biden put out the red carpet for his Ukrainian colleague, who was dressed in an olive green sweatshirt, cargo trousers, and boots. The two initially met in the Oval Office, where Mr. Biden stated that the United States stands with the great people of Ukraine and referred to Zelensky as a great leader. Zelensky then left the White House for Capitol Hill, where he was scheduled to meet with congressional leaders and address a joint session of Congress. The trip was planned in the last week, and the arrangements were kept secret due to the extraordinary security considerations that come with a wartime leader visiting outside his country. Sitting in the Oval Office, Zelensky said it was a great honor to be welcomed to the White House and thanked Mr. Biden from my heart, from the hearts of Ukrainians, all Ukrainians, support and leadership. In an unexpected move, Zelensky presented Mr. Biden with a combat medal handed to him by a Ukrainian captain serving on the front lines. "He's very brave," and he said, "Give it to a very brave president." According to Zelensky, the captain commands a unit that uses a weapon system supplied by the United States. Shortly before Zelensky arrived, the State Department announced a new $1.85 billion military aid package for Ukraine, bringing the total military aid delivered to Ukraine to $22 billion. As a first, the United States is delivering to Ukraine a Patriot missile battery, a sophisticated air defense system capable of repelling Russian missiles and aircraft, hundreds of thousands of mortar and artillery shells, hundreds of armored vehicles, and specialized kits are also included in the new package, which considerably improves the effectiveness and accuracy of bombs dropped from fighter jets. "We're going to continue to strengthen Ukraine's ability to defend itself, particularly air defense," Mr. Biden stated, "and that's why we're going to be providing Ukraine with a Patriot missile battery and training your forces to be able to accurately use it." The Ukrainian president's address to Congress comes as U.S. lawmakers attempt to adopt a massive $1.7 trillion government spending bill that contains nearly $45 billion in military, humanitarian, and economic aid for Ukraine. If approved by Congress, it would represent the most recent round of emergency aid to Ukraine. Since the invasion, lawmakers have granted more than $65 billion in overall aid to Ukraine, including financial and humanitarian support, though some House Republicans have expressed skepticism about providing direct funding to the country. The additional funding would push U.S. support to more than $100 billion. The omnibus package would provide $858 billion in defense spending, a $76 billion increase over the fiscal year 2022. It also includes $772.5 billion for non-defense discretionary spending, a $68 billion increase over the previous year. Appropriators approved $45 billion in aid for Ukraine and NATO partners in the face of Russia's continued assault, $7 billion more than the Biden administration requested. The bill also includes salary increases for U.S. troops and civilian federal employees. The package also provides $118 billion for veterans' medical services, including cash for recently passed legislation that assists soldiers who have been exposed to fire pits and other harmful substances. The law includes $40 billion in funding to help towns affected by wildfires, hurricanes, flooding, and other natural disasters. It includes $1 billion for Puerto Rico's electrical grid, which hurricanes and other disasters have damaged, and $600 million for Jackson, Mississippi's water issue. The omnibus bill includes revisions to the Electoral Count Act, centuries-old legislation that former President Donald Trump and his associates attempted to use in their failed attempt to overturn the 2020 election. The law was changed in reaction to the January 6th incident. A provision to prohibit the use of the social media app TikTok on government-issued devices is also included. The bill is similar to state-level prohibitions on the app, which have been passed in Texas, Georgia, and other states in recent weeks. Meanwhile, the $1.7 trillion spending measure does not include the COVID-19 funding requested by the White House to assist increased vaccine and treatment supplies and fund next-generation research. Cannabis banking legislation was also left on the table. The SAFE Banking Act, which was passed by the House with bipartisan backing last year, would allow banks to provide services to cannabis businesses in areas where it is legal. Despite Democrats' push to reauthorize the benefit, which has been credited with reducing child poverty, the enhanced child tax credit was left out of the measure. Legislation to reduce the disparity in sentencing between crack and powder cocaine convictions, a priority for criminal justice activists, was also excluded from the budget deal. A bill that would have provided a path to citizenship for dreamer immigrants, those who came to the United States illegally as children, was also left out, as was the Afghan Adjustment Act, which would have put refugees who were resettled when U.S. troops left Afghanistan on a path to permanent residency. But what effect will the bill have on the war? These two headline packages alone have the potential to change the course of the war. The continual bombing of energy infrastructure is Russia's most potent threat right now. It is making winter colder and more uncomfortable for some people by plunging cities into darkness for up to 12 hours a day, and often longer, with the intention of eroding high Ukrainian morale. Patriot air defense systems might intercept a huge number of Russian missiles and attack drones, while Ukraine already claims a high success rate. For example, on Monday, it stated 30 out of 35 missiles were intercepted. The Patriot is also a sign that NATO's best technology is on the table to assist Ukraine in winning the war, or at the very least, to keep Russia at bay. More precision weapons are critical because they assure Ukraine strikes its targets while leaving no civilians behind. And it means that Ukraine will not have to deal with the hundreds of thousands of shells that Russia looks to be burning through as it blanket bombards regions it wishes to conquer. As the battle enters its second year, the consumption rate of ammunition for both sides will become an existential issue. While U.S. military delivery enhances Ukraine's position, Kremlin analysts prefer to analyze the latest statements from Russian President Vladimir Putin. The latest installment, according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, leads to an aggravation of the conflict and does not bode well for Ukraine. However, Moscow is training to equip and rally its conventional forces, and it appears to be running out of new cards to play, with the exception of its nuclear forces. China and India have joined the West in openly opposing the use of nuclear weapons, making that option much less plausible. Western observers have noticed that Russia has constantly complained about these deliveries, but has remained very quiet in its actual response to the breaking of what would have been deemed red lines as late as January.